Viewers, you have been so patient with this, and I thank you. You've been waiting this top 100 for a while, but I've had all those other reviews to get out, and I had a convention last weekend, and all sorts of other stuff on my plate. But now, finally, for this month, we are going to concentrate hard on getting the top 100 out. So without further ado, let's get cracking. Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector from the Broken Meeple, and if you like this video, please remember to leave a comment and a thumbs up. It means the world to me to know you appreciate the content. So this is my top 100 games. I do this every year now. For about 5 or 6 years I've been doing this YouTube channel, and even longer if you count my written reviews, and the top 100 has been something I've done on like the anniversary of the channel. Granted, I'm a tad little late this time, because normally this is done in early August, and now I'm having to resort to September. Whatever, a month. Give me a break. It's not like we're not devoid of time here or nothing. But this is a list that I really enjoy doing. I have to go and rank a ton of games. Bear in mind I've got about 200 or so in my collection, give or take, and only half of those games can even make my top 100 list. And that's not to say that the other 100 are garbage, it's just the fact that there's a lot of games I enjoy, but you can only have 100 on the list. And so these are like the creme de la creme of all the games that I enjoy. So in order to put this list together, I have to go onto a site called Meeple. This is a ranking engine system where you can pretty much do whatever top 10 list you like, but for board games you can import your collection from Board Game Geek, the database that holds all the games on it, and essentially do one-on-one comparisons between all the games that you have. So for example, I'd have to do, is Abyss better than Teotihuacan? Is Viral better than Viscounts of the West Kingdom? Is Broom Servers better than Spectre Ups? It gives you all these comparisons, and after you've done all of them, it basically calculates what your list should be. Now, granted, you have to do a little bit of tweaking afterwards sometimes, and I had to on this occasion. It's not 100% accurate the first time you do it. You just have to look through it and go, oh, I forgot that game. Oh, there's a slight correction here. As I know, that really should be higher than that. As I say, it's very difficult to get it entirely right on the first time, but with a few tweaks, you're pretty much there. And with 100 games, bear in mind I have to slot about 200 games into the system in order to compare them. Whoo-wee, yeah, it takes a long time to do, but it's good fun. It leads to some really tough choices, and if you've been paying attention to my Twitter feed in recent months, you might have noticed I put some on there anyway. But they have a crowdfunding system on the website, and honestly, I implore everybody who uses that system to donate a little bit of cash, just $1 or a quid, whatever, and show them that you are grateful for the system that they have in place. So, Meeple, thank you. You make this list possible. So while I'm explaining the list, I've basically got my handy tablet here, which has all the stats and last year's list and all that lot. It's got all the stats I need to explain what's going on, including names and designers, who's the most popular, etc. And I can tell you these stats before we get going. 15 games have fallen off the list since last year, and the vast majority of them were in my bottom 20. However, there were a few that were higher than that, and we'll get into those reasons when I come across those numbers. 13 new games have made it onto the list, so new games that I have played since the last time I did this list have now made their way to my top 100, which is not a lot of games, you gotta say, really. I mean, 13, considering hundreds of games get released all the time. Like I say, I just don't think 2020 and 2021 have been that great a year, you know, that great a time span for games. But as I say, it's very difficult to just suddenly go, oh yeah, this one that I've loved forever is now suddenly garbage just because a new game has come out. Nah, I kind of subscribe a bit more to the cult of the old than the cult of the new here. But also you're thinking, well hang on, 15, 13, what about the other two? Well, that's because 2 games have returned to the list. 2 games that have previously gotten to the top 100, fallen off for whatever reason, and have now returned. And I'll give you my reasons why they've returned later. But yep, I got the tablet, you've waited long enough, so without further ado, the top 100. Let's get going with the 100 to 91.
Get on with it.
Yes, get on with it!
So my number 100 is, well, probably one of the more controversial picks on this list, actually, because some of you are going to be thinking, wait a minute, 100? This is way too low. How dare this be your 100? Clearly you think it's garbage, because apparently the joke going around with this is that if you don't think this is a 10 out of 10 game, you think it's garbage. At least that's what the Dice Tower got credit for. So, Mike Delisio, if you're watching this list, go figure, but if you ever do, then sorry, this is not my number 1 game of all time. It's my number 100 game of all time, which is not on my my top of my shelf anymore. I remember, I put it downstairs. It's Dwellings of Eldervale. Dwellings of Eldervale from Breaking Games and Loot Glory is a really good hybrid game. But as I say, some people will class it as like their favourite game of all time. For me, it's a little bit lower. But it's in my 100, so it's gotta be good, right? Well, it is. You are controlling different tiles on a board in a hybrid style game. Each of you takes control of a faction with different asymmetrical units and powers, and essentially you are fighting each other for control of these areas so you can build your like house buildings on effectively. But in doing so, you're grabbing magic cards, you're buying little development cards that are related to different types of manor. So the forest one might have you doing various things like get a tree, like a boar monster on your side, or heal characters, but then the fire magic one's going to allow you to summon fireballs and burn each other and that. Sounds a lot more thematic than it actually is in practice, but the mechanics of this game are pretty solid, the production quality is stellar, and it's got a very good Ghost of Eldervale solo mode, which is frankly the best way I like to play this game. It would be higher if the combat system wasn't a little bit swingy for my liking, and maybe if the theme was a bit stronger. I love having these cool monsters all over the place with the sound bases, but that's kind of a gimmick, you know, that's not something that's going to increase the rating of it.
Big monster!
And the combat is essentially dice, and if you get attacked all the time, you're going to struggle to recover. So there are some issues I have with the game, but the pros of it outweigh those cons to a great deal, to the point where I do enjoy bringing this out, just primarily as a solo mode. It's a really, really good solo mode. But yeah, my number 100, Dwellings of Eldervale. And my number 99 has fallen 24 places from 75. I don't know how much longer this is going to be on the top 100 though, to be perfectly honest. And that is First Martians, Adventures on the Red Planet. This is the kind of pseudo-sequel to Robinson Crusoe that Portal put out. Everybody likes to give this game garbage. The game is not garbage. It's on my top 100, alright? It's a solid game. But the issue with it is mainly just that it had a bit of a shoddy launch. The app had some bugs, the rulebook was pretty dire, let's face it. But, you know, the app got updated, now works fine. There are revised rulebooks on the internet that you can grab on Board Game Geek and the Portal website, and I enjoy playing this one as a good solo game where I'm kind of trying to play a more serious side to the whole idea of landing on Mars. Like in Robinson Crusoe, you're given a scenario, there's some survival aspects like, you know, my oxygen's running out, or the farm's not producing food, but then you might get signals that's like, hang on, something's going on outside. Shall we send the rover, go collect samples? There's a lot of different cool scenarios that you've got, and even a couple of little legacy campaigns, one of which, you know, I played fairly recently actually, and it's a solid little like mini campaign. There's a decent amount of content here. Now granted, it's not going to get any more content ever, like Ignacio's pretty much done with it, but you can find this cheap as chips on most like clearance sales, and honestly, give it a go if you want a more serious style Mars game and you're okay to make the effort to go find the revised rulebooks. Yes, it's a bit of a, like, it's got a bit of a barrier to entry in that regard, but it's worth it when you overcome it. My number 99, it's still holding on in there on the top 100 from Ignacy. First Martians, hang in there. Will you be there next year? We'll have to see. My number 98 has fallen 29 places from 69. This is Corey Gnezgo from Fantasy Flight Games, and this one is falling mainly because A, I prefer to play it solo, and I haven't played it solo that much, and B, the lack of an expansion is really hurting this one. Like, you want to do top 10 games that need an expansion, if this isn't number 1 or 2, I'd be surprised. Star Wars Outer Rim. This is still a really cool, fun sci-fi game where you are taking the role of the bounty hunters. So you are going around completing missions and capturing people and doing assassinations and dodging the Empire and the Rebels. Like, we're not getting involved with your shtick, but they're in the way in space, whilst also dealing with other rival bounty hunters that are kind of trying to do the same thing as you. It's very thematic, it's a really good fun game, it creates its own little stories, but the problem with it and why it's dropping is because the lack of an expansion is really hurting it. The card decks that you have for items and missions are pretty limited, and so without that sense of variety, you can't get, you know, a lot of that replay value back. So I don't know how much longer this is going to stay in the top 100 at this rate. I don't want to sell the game because I can hold on to dear hope that there might be an expansion in the future, but you know, I still enjoy bringing it out every once in a while, but it is falling because of that lack of variety. It's going to hurt the game if you do decide to get it, but it's still good fun when you play it. You just might not necessarily see something new each time. It's more of a case of, alright, well, we've seen this before, but now it's in the hands of this person with this power, and I've bought this ship instead of this ship. So, you know, variety is hurting, and I am a variety of the spice of life person, but still hanging on there. 98, Star Wars Outer Rim. My number 97 has dropped 15 places from 82, so it's still hanging on in there. The other one of this, I will mention, has fallen off the list, but it was in my hundreds, so it's not exactly like it's fallen very far. This is the one from Tasty Minstrel that I still prefer out of these two games that were produced to do with the Old West, is Pioneer Days. Pioneer Days is a really interesting little kind of Oregon Trail style Euro game where each of you takes control of like a party of wagons with a character with an asymmetrical power, and you're collecting resources like medicine and food and wood to build more wagons and such, but it's done with this really cool dice drafting game. You've got custom dice with different faces, and when you take a die you can use it for one of 3 different actions. You've got multi-use dice now, as if I didn't like multi-use cards enough. Now I've got multi-use dice. But again, it's a very simple mechanic. Just choose a die, resolve it, get whatever bonus you need. But it's one of those kind of things that where you've got to choose your battles, because one thing I love with dice drafting games is when the die that's not taken is the one that does something else. The one you don't take levels up a particular track for a disaster, like getting robbed or storms or famine. And you have to pick your battles as to whether you can survive the brunt of one disaster on the basis that you can survive another one a lot easier. Maybe you can survive them all. Maybe you just don't care about the disasters and you're just going to take them as they come. It's your choice. But very simple, very straightforward. You know, you get the stuff and then at the end of a week of rounds you just go trade it in for points. Straightforward. But the theme is well represented, dice drafting is great, and it causes a few laughs where you look at people's parties and see the disasters, you know, like getting their way. It's just a really nice underrated Euro. I don't hear a lot of people talk about this one, and even less so about the Old West Empresario, which is the one that has fallen off the list. But honestly, give Pioneer Days a go if you are lucky enough to actually find a copy of this game anywhere, because of unfortunately what's happened to Tasty Minstrel Games. You're not going to see a reprint of this anytime soon, if ever. So if you do see it on a clearance sale or secondhand like bring and buy, I do recommend you grab it. Pioneer Days. My number 96 has actually gone up 1 place. Yeah, as if that makes any difference on the list 1 spot. Well, I don't know, maybe if it's my 1 and 2 that might make a difference. But this is Takinoko from Madigo Games, and Antoine Beau's a classic. I mean, come on, I've got the giant set here. Do you think I'm not going to like Takinoko as much enough to get on my top 100 list? But I've got the normal version in the other room as well. This is more kind of a show-off thing. I used to take it to Dice Portsmouth events when they were still setting up and say like, oh, are we teaching games? Well, let me bring this boom, giant spectacle game and let's have a bit of a laugh with it. But Takinoko's just a nice, charming Zen game with the panda moving around eating the bamboo, a gardener trying to grow trees while the panda's trying to eat it. Very simple rules, although not gateway level, I will say, but it's just cute. It's cute, it's charming, and it just, I don't know, it just gives me a nice relaxing feel every time I play it, regardless of whether it's 2, 3, or 4 players. Now granted, there's a bit of luck in it, and certainly granted you want to use a couple of the variants in the book. I highly recommend the 2 variants it speaks of, one of which is that you can't auto-complete an objective when you pick it up. Definitely play that variant, but also, and Z Garcia will back me up on this, play the variant where you can't eat the last bit of tree on a bamboo. Sorry, the last bit of bamboo on a tree, get it right? Because this does certain things. 1, the gardener's objectives are easier. Secondly, the panda objectives are a little bit harder. And thirdly, you can tell which tile is irrigated because every irrigated tile has a piece of bamboo on it. It solves so many problems, and it's a variant. Trust me, use it as an official rule. But that aside, still great. Get chibis if you can. It adds a little bit of extra depth to the game, not to mention the hilarity of having this female panda chase the male panda around and try and make babies. It's quite amusing. But yeah, charming, lovely little game for the 96, Takinoko. Okay, we've got the second new debut. In fact, I should have actually mentioned before I started the list, we got 3 new games on this list and 1 returning game on this batch of 10. This one is one that really is not getting any buzz at all. Now, it's not like it's a game that's going to blow your mind, but nobody talks about it. And when I reviewed this game, what, like about a month or 2 ago, barely any views. It's like people just aren't interested in this game. Granted, the theme is pretty boring and bland, but the Court of Miracles, which is right behind me down there, is a solid area control game. It's really easy to teach. It's got like about 2-3 pages of rules. It's still got some hidden kind of like bluffing mechanics in it, where you're placing your tokens on the areas to try and control them, but they've got different values and abilities, and you don't necessarily know which ones the player has put down. And it's a simple premise. Control areas, get their abilities, get some gold, get your little towers out. First one to do them all wins. That's pretty much the game. But the whole idea of timing, when you're going to win certain areas, when you're going to decide, you know what, this is a losing battle, I'll use this ability to switch myself over there, bluffing another opponent, like I've put one down here. Is it my strong man? You'll have to come and find out, won't you? There's a lot of like, not straight up take that, I guess. Well, I suppose it is a take that-y game, but it's not like, oh, I play a card and it screws you over. No, but you know, if you are in a winning position, people are going to try and screw you over. It just happens. But super fast, super simple, looks pretty decent when it's on the table, and it does 5 players really well. 5 players is such a horrible count for any game, but this one is actually best at 5. I make a big deal about this in the review. Seriously, go check out that video if you've not heard of this game and you like area control, because if you do like that genre and you've not heard of this, you're potentially missing out. It's new on my list, it's definitely worth picking up. 95, The Court of Miracles. My 94 has dropped 27 places from 67, and people are going to be slightly annoyed about this one, because technically now this means that as a result of this top 100, this is now my 4th favourite Lacerda game. I recently culled On Mars for the collection, so spoiler alert, On Mars is not on my top 100 anymore. But this was my 3rd favourite Lacerda for a while, but it seems as though it's now reverted to be my 4th, and that is Vinhos Deluxe Edition. Vinhos is a really good Eagle Griffin Lacerda game, where you're building up vineyards, making wine, and then getting experts to taste your wine and showcase it at the fair, while also selling it either to the local cafe or exporting it overseas for different bonuses or points. It's a really cool thematic representation of a vine business. Not so much the vineyard, that's more viticulture shtick, but this one is more, right, here's my vineyards, they produce a wine, and now I'm going to the fair to show it off and get prestige for it. It's more that line of work, but it's a really solid game. It takes a little bit to get back into when you haven't learned the rules for a bit, and the solo mode is a bit disappointing in this one, but I enjoy playing this with a full 3 or 4 players, you know, to have a bit of tension on that little map where you're moving your worker, and it is a very well represented theme, but I guess it's just not being picked up as much, or maybe it's because a certain other Lacerda game has perhaps eclipsed it in terms of mechanics. Well, you'll have to wait and see on that one, but yeah, I still really enjoy it. It's just dropped a bit for me. I'm pretty confident it will stay on the top 100 unless we get an influx of better games, I guess, next year, but it's still going strong. 94, my 4th favourite Lacerda, Vinhos Deluxe. So for my 93, we've got the first returning game to the list. Yes, this game was on my list about 2 years ago, and then it fell off and stayed in the hundreds. Now it's kind of come back on, and I think the only reason is because of expansions. This is Arkham Horror 3rd Edition. I've got 2nd Edition in one of those giant crates in the other room, but it's like, oh, blimey, if I got to learn the rules to that and get it all out, that ain't happening. And I've got the same problem with Eldritch Horror. Arkham Horror 3rd Edition is an easier one to get to the table. Yeah, it's still got a fair amount of rules in it, but they're nowhere near as complicated as some of the other ones. But this one sort of keeps it a little bit more contained in the city of Arkham still. It still retains that whole cool Cthulhu mythos of having like the scenario to go through, the big ancient one to prevent, and dealing with little monsters and all the different exploration, like bits of story that you read. It's still got all that. It's just a bit of a simpler one to maintain. Now, granted, you know, is it better than some of the other ones, despite being a bit more streamlined? You'll have to wait and see. But I think recent expansions have brought this on, because I hadn't played it for a while. Then it's had a release of expansions, and some of them have been better than others, although I did quite like it's the one with the big fish creatures. I forget what the expansion was called. It might be called Dead by Night, but it essentially uses the deep ones a bit more, and that was a pretty good expansion. I've yet to get the new one, the Twilight one. I feel like I've got enough content in there as it is, and I don't think I could fit another expansion in the box. But yeah, still really solid. It's returned. I don't think it will go much higher. This has always been around the kind of 90s front for me, but yeah, FFG have done a good one here for me. 93, returning back to the top 100. Arkham Horror 3rd Edition. Okay, moving on to my 92 after my neighbour stopped mowing the lawn.
And exactly how many times did he fall out the window?
who'd live in the suburbs, eh? My 92 is a new entry to this list from Mr. Duncan and Osprey Games. Yes, you've seen me do a lot of their reviews lately because they did very kindly send me a bunch of games to review. This is probably the one I would give the highest rating to, even though there is one that I technically enjoy a little bit more. You know, we'll get on to reasons why later. But this one is Cryptid. This is a very light deduction game. I say light, it will still burn your brain out a little bit when you're playing it, but especially if you play it in advanced mode. But this one is a very simple rule set. It's abstract as all get out. Here's a monster on a board. There's only one space it can be. Each of you knows a clue based on the terrain and landscape and buildings that are there. Find it. Ask people clues. You know, can it be here? Yes? I wonder why. Can it possibly be here? No. Okay, so maybe your clue is this, but it can't be that because it's too close to that. And the idea is that you piece together through the placements that people make what their possible clue could be, and once you decipher enough of them, you can kind of go, it's gotta be there, and go for it. This game can be done in anything from like 5 to 50 minutes, depending on whether you play on advanced or basic mode, and how quickly someone figures it out or gets very lucky at the particular thing. So it's a really cool, solid deduction game. Yes, there are other games, one of which on my shelf there, Search for Planet X, and things like Detective and that, which are heavier, more thinky deduction games, but the advanced mode Encrypted will still have you burning your brain cells quite a bit, and even the basic game will have you occasionally looking at the board going, I don't know what your clue is. Where could it be? But it's not beyond the realms of most people. It's gateway level in terms of rules. I actually want to try and put this in front of my parents, although I wonder if they'll be able to handle the deduction part. We'll have to see. But it's a really solid, cool game, and all you have is basically a bunch of pretty rubbish artwork tiles with some wooden pieces everywhere and a few books, and that's pretty much it. Minimalistic components and style, but a really entertaining game. It's surprising that you don't always need great aesthetics to make a good game, though it certainly does help. My 92, Cryptid. And finally for this section, my 91 is a game that's fallen 31 places from 60. I just haven't played it in a while. Not to say I don't like the game, but it just hasn't got the plays. It requires a bit of setup to figure, right, hang on, I need this particular adversary with this scenario, and then what the exact rules are. Yeah, I need these particular cards. I've yet to try out the career mode that the expansion gave, even though it's been sat in the box for ages. This is Hostage Negotiator. Still a really cool, fun solo dice game, which is just, like I say, it's a dice game. Of course it's going to have luck in it. I don't know why everyone complains about that. It's dice. Hello? But it's, you know, hostage negotiation theme actually works pretty well with it. You are in those situations where it's like, all right, a roll. No, they killed another 2 hostages. I gotta get one more out, otherwise it's all over. You know, that theme really does come out quite well for a dice game. But by now you've got expansions, you've got a career campaign expansion, which I still haven't played. I'd be interested to know in the comments what you guys think on that one actually. But on top of that, you've got all the different little mini packs that you have with different adversaries. So here's your run-of-the-mill serial killer. Here's your guy who just wants to get hospital bills for his daughter. Here's the evil cult. Here's the disgruntled CEO. There's a lot of different scenarios and they all change up how the game can play. There's even a really interesting one where you effectively have your rival. Like a rival hostage negotiator is the one who's taking the hostages. I mean, that's quite a cool story in itself. It's a really solid game. It just hasn't had the plays to get, you know, to stay further up the list. But it's still there on my shelf in the big box. It's going to stay there, and I don't think this will fall off the list. I just need to find time to really sit down and play it again and go through that career mode. I think that's the next step. So to finish off this list, 91 from 60, Hostage Negotiator. And there we go. First 10. As I say, running through them relatively quick, you know, trying not to make these videos too long, obviously get to the really, really juicy stuff, which is when we get into like the top 50 and I start going squee about half of these games. But, you know, anything that in my top 100 is a solid, amazing game. When I rank these games, you know, I've got my scaling on what's a 7 and an 8 for a seal of endorsement, and a 9 out of 10 for seal of distinction. But when I'm ranking stuff for my top 100, I pretty much pick 150 odd games, and we're talking minimum rank 8. And not many of them are 8. Most of them tend to hit a 9 or a 10 with me, but certainly minimum 8. So anything that's got a rating of a 7 has no chance of being in my top 100. So all of these games are considered great, excellent, or legendary. So even the bottom 10 of my top 100 are games that I consider a good mix of great and excellent. So you gotta say that when I'm doing the bottom part of this top 100, it's not like, oh, let's just get through this riff-raff and get onto the good stuff. No, everything, in my opinion, is good on this top 100. And like I say, got 90 more games to talk about, and I can't wait to get in on that and start doing those videos. So that's it for me on this top 100 video. If you like what you see, then please leave a comment and a like. It means the world to me to know that you appreciate the content and the effort that goes into it. Don't forget that the video is sponsored by zatu.co.uk. Check out their website to see if there's any games that you'd like to purchase to fill some holes in your collection. And if you want to check out the comparative top 100 list, then check out these two videos, which will get you started on another ton of videos to do with my previous year's top 100. Never say that there's not enough content for you. Take care, and remember, until next time, it's only a game. Bye for now.